It's going to happen. Social Security changes are being negotiated right now between both Republicans and Democrats. There are currently disagreements over two key changes, and it could affect millions of people and overall benefit payments. Lawmakers are hashing out plans to shore up Social Security's ailing trust funds into possible changes that will affect the benefits that Americans receive. Broadly, that comes down to two key changes: raising the retirement age and increasing the amount of annual wages subject to the Social Security payroll tax. That can mean requiring Americans to wait until they are 70 to collect their full retirement benefits. And current rules have set the full retirement age at 66 to 67, depending on the date of birth. It could also mean requiring high income Americans to pay more in Social Security payroll tax. And currently, that tax only applies to wages of up to $160,000. To be sure, other changes might be on the table. Senator King and Senator Cassidy are reportedly leading a bipartisan coalition to propose changes, including raising the retirement age to 70 years old. And their plan also reportedly calls for the creation of a sovereign wealth fund that could invest in Social Security trust funds and stocks. If the returns on those funds fell short, well, it could cause more wages to be subject to payroll taxes, as well as higher rates on those levies. Spokesman of the Cassidy and King declined to provide further details. Meanwhile, Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders reintroduced a bill that calls for reapplying Social Security payroll tax on wages for people making over $250,000. It would also require wealthy individuals to pay a 12% tax on businesses and investment income. The plan would add $2,400 a year to benefits. And discussion about how to shore up Social Security has increased since Joe Biden's State of the Union, during which he prompted both sides of the aisle to promise not to cut the program. But the clock is ticking to shore up the program. A recent report projected that Social Security's combined funds may run out in 2023, 2 years sooner than the actual people estimate that could happen. And changes to prevent those cuts may have a profound effect on Americans' retirement and the United States wealth distribution. The Social Security full retirement age is gradually changing to 67, based on changes enacted in 1983. Lawmakers are considering raising the full retirement age again to 70, and the change will result in a 20% benefit cut across the board to lifetime benefits. As Democrats resist benefit cuts, Republicans oppose higher taxes. Finding a compromise to fix the program will not be easy. It will be crucial to look at the effects of any reform package in its entirety. A higher retirement age may be accompanied by other changes like a robust minimum benefit, for example, that could protect people at the bottom of the income distribution. But just raising the payroll taxes without any benefit cuts could provide some enough money to shore up the program, and some questions about whether that would actually be responsible when other tax increases are needed to pay for the country's needs. As per the SSA schedule, SSI are dispersed on the first day of every month, but in certain situations where the first of the month lands on a Saturday or Sunday, the payment is expected to be sent on the Friday of the preceding month. The government funding, and he said he was urging his Republican colleagues to do the same. It's not yet clear whether Republicans will unite behind Graham's efforts, but most GOP aides familiar with the matter say they do not expect that. Throughout the crisis, the American government has sent out rounds of stimulus payments, first under the former president and now with President Biden. But most stimulus checks were sent as electronic checks to bank accounts. But when the IRS didn't have a recipient's direct deposit information, they mailed paper checks. So like all payment checks sent from the Treasury, if these checks are not cashed within 1 year, they expire. And that's good news. You can request a new one if you have a check that expires. Approximately 9 million people in the US, 9 million US citizens that is, live overseas. Stimulus payments worth $5.5 billion were sent to more than 1/3 of those expat soldiers and rural travelers. There is a $1,400 fourth stimulus payment. The IRS has released a new announcement that for all taxpayers that have received the stimulus checks, that have received the stimulus cash. With tax day well behind us, millions of Americans are still waiting for the refunds. Some have already been waiting for several months for the federal income tax refunds to arrive after completing paper returns and mailing them in late January or early February. As of August, the IRS has had around 8 million unprocessed individual tax returns. Of them, 1 million returns contain errors or require special handling, while 6.5 million are paper returns that still must be reviewed and processed. In its latest update, the agency said that this is a mix of returns for 2021 and late file returns for the previous tax years. The IRS says it's essentially been unable to process the 2022 returns until it finishes processing all the 2021 returns. So before the crisis, the IRS typically delivered refunds to paper filers within 4 to 6 weeks. However, over the past year, refund delays tied to paper filings have generally exceeded 6 months. While doing taxes can be stressful. The process can be satisfying once your return hits your account. The good news is that the IRS has to pay interest on any money it owes you, so your tax refund comes from your 2021 return, and the IRS is required to start paying interest on overpayment 45 days after accepting a tax return. To determine the status of your return, you can use the IRS Tax Refund Tracker, which will also let you know if your return has been rejected by the IRS because of errors. If you filed a proper return and you did it on time and the IRS does not issue your refund within 45 days, the agency is required to start paying interest on your refund amount. As of July 1st, the IRS inflation
Senator Van Hollen of Maryland is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and great to see you, Mr. Chairman. Great to see an SEC chairman from the great state of Maryland.
It's great to see my senator.
Yeah, right. Let me just pick up on the first point that Senator Kennedy raised in terms of implementation of the Holding Foreign Countries Accountable Act. I just want to thank you and your team for pursuing that. I also agree we should shorten the time period to 2 years, and I want to thank Senator Kennedy for his work on this. The idea, of course, was to make sure we protect American investors, especially smaller investors, by ensuring that all companies listed on our exchanges comply with our accounting rules. And I know you had very tough negotiations with China. Thank you for keeping us informed. The ultimate proof is in the pudding, right? Their execution of it. But I do want to salute you and your team for all your efforts to date on that. I also want to thank you for moving ahead on a rulemaking to crack down on abuses of 10b5-1 trading plans by insiders. At the beginning of this Congress, Senator Fisher and I introduced legislation directing the SEC to undertake such a rulemaking. You did it, and we are monitoring that carefully. I don't know if you saw the Wall Street Journal article back in June, which I think, along with other studies, revealed clear abuses by insiders in these areas. And of course, when insiders benefit, it means the investors lose often, because sometimes these are gamed to take the gains before the overall value of a company decreases, stock value. So I want to thank you for that. We're monitoring that. I also want to thank you and your team for recognizing the real issue of fraudulent scams, security scams, often directed against seniors. These amount to up to $3 billion every year. And we have a bipartisan bill here that I know the chairman and the ranking member are probably tired of hearing of, but I appreciate their I think, support for the bill, which is to empower states to better crack down on this fraud by creating a grant, federal grant through the SEC to help them out. And we've heard testimony on behalf of state